Welcome to the Sun today for the 14th of January 2022. This morning we had an M flare and also a comet crashed into the Sun. So it's quite an exciting day. We have a lot of regions on the Sun at the moment, so let's go through them one by one, starting with the officially numbered regions, and that will be 2924 on the southwest limb. It's been a large region and it's been on the Sun for basically the whole of the rotation. But it's now getting towards the limb, and although it looks as though it's decaying, and probably is to some extent, we're losing a lot of the small spots because of foreshortening when it's near the limb. This may well come back in a couple of weeks' time, but I suspect it will be much simpler than it is now. The next region is 2925. It is a simple single spot with a couple of satellite spots down in the southwest. It seems to be decaying over the last few days. Next we have region 2926 in the northwest corner. That's 2 is going over the limb, and so we're losing some of the spots on the region, so it's hard to tell whether it is in fact growing or decaying. We jump to 2927 near the disk center in the south. It is a single spot which looks as though it's fairly stable at the moment, though I suspect it's not going to last for very much longer as is, as the differential rotation of the Sun will start to rip it apart. The next region is 2928 down in the southwest quadrant of the Sun. It's a small region, came up relatively recently, and has 2 small groups of spots. Whether this continues to grow or decays away is a matter of a toss of a coin, I suspect. Active region 2929 is a relatively new region. It looks very active and has produced 2 groups of fairly strong spots. So I suspect this will continue to grow over the next few days. Immediately above 2929 is active region 2930, also another new region that seems to be growing spots fairly rapidly. So this is worth keeping an eye on. The last of the numbered regions is 2931. This is a fairly strong region in the northwest quadrant and is seemingly growing fairly slowly. So this will be around for a while yet until it rotates over the limb. Just this morning we had a new region appear in the southeast quadrant of the Sun. At the moment it's just 3 small spots, but has the potential to grow. To its south and east there's yet another new region. That's about at east 62, south 29. You can see it here, and at the moment it's just a single spot. Until we see more of the structure of it, we don't know whether it's going to grow or decay. At long last we're beginning to see the first signs of the region behind the northeast limb that's been producing all these large flares. You can see there's a little group of sunspots right on the very limb at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to see this rotate onto the disk and see how much more active it will be. As a result of all these changes in the sunspots, the sunspot number has increased to over 100 at the moment. It's a little bit behind where it was this time last rotation, but it's still fairly close. The GOES X-ray monitor confirms this. We had a C flare late last night and then an M1.8 flare this morning, and that's been followed by 3 small C flares this morning. So I think we can expect a good deal more of these sorts of events in the next few days as that region comes over the limb, and there may be a similar region coming over the southern limb in a day or so. First of all, we'll start with our usual sunspot movie from the Solar Dynamics Observatory HMI instrument. This will be a movie from the 12th to the 14th of January 2022. Next, let's take a look at some of those flares. For that, we'll use the SDO AIA instrument, the 94 angstrom channel, which has a temperature of about 6 megakelvin. And this too will run from the 12th to the 14th of January 2022. Just to show you how much the solar cycle 25 has progressed over the last 2 years, the image on the left was taken right at solar minimum 2 years ago. And you can see there's very few regions on the sun. In fact, there's not very much on the sun at all. A year later, it's not much better. In fact, probably about the same. But now look at the sun today. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 regions on the sun right now. And that's and some of them are large and very well established. And we're getting a lot of flares as well. So from that point of view, the sun has really woken up in the last year. And so we have solar cycle 25 well underway. Always a fun part of this is what is happening as far as coronal mass ejections are concerned, because they're not always associated with flares, and you can have them at all sorts of time, even at solar minimum. So let's take a look at the SOHO-LASCO. First of all, we're going to look at the C2 field of view for the coronal mass ejections, and then we're going to look at the C3 field of view because a comet flashed into the field of view and got destroyed as it dived into the sun, which is always an interesting movie. Now let's take a look at that sun-diving comet. It's hard to see, so you're going to have to look at it carefully, and I'm going to make it repeat 3 times so you get a chance. But it follows the path showed by this dotted line here, starting very, very faint in the southeast quadrant and dies away about where the end of this dotted line is. So the actual comet doesn't make it to the sun at all. It gets evaporated by the solar wind and the heat from the sun long before it gets into the sun itself. The solar wind is seemingly relatively quiet, but notice the VZ component, the vertical component of the interplanetary magnetic field, is taking a long dive to the south, right at the end here. And that might be the influence of that coronal hole that I was talking about yesterday, pictured here on the right. That usually means that the Earth's magnetosphere will more likely reconnect with the magnetic fields in the interplanetary medium, and that can cause geomagnetic storms. However, the density is still relatively modest at about 10 particles per cubic centimeter. The speed is quite low, so it's less than 400, so that's not really something to worry about at the moment. And the temperature is dropping, which usually indicates that this material is coming more from the surface of the sun than the corona. So it'll be rare watching KP index over the next few hours. Speaking of the KP index, at the moment is relatively quiet, sitting at about 1. So what can we conclude from all of this? The sunspot number is increasing steadily. The region behind the northeast limb produced an M1.8 flare, the 12th largest flare so far this cycle. We can expect more flares from this region, it would seem. In fact, we've just had a series of C flares. And we had a sun-diving comet, which we haven't seen for a while. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.